Thank you.
All right, our brief agenda for today. We'll start with an introduction, so a brief coverage of what's been in the news regarding climate change and health and modeling. And if you have any other kind of news items that you'd like to flag for us, if you've been featured in some news articles, please feel free to add to that section. And then a warm-up question, just so that we have a brief conversation, everyone can get off of mute, and followed by announcements, some funding, speaker, and event opportunities. And then our main piece of discussion today will be on catalogs for climate and infectious disease models, one that was created by IAI and Welcome, and one that Kaushik had helped put together just as a part of our landscaping this year. And we'll have a discussion on that. So most of the time reserved for that section. All right, so in the news, I'm going to start with the top right, the headline being "Mosquitoes are growing public health threat, reversing years of progress." This was a series that was in the New York Times, written by Stephanie Nolan. One of Malaria No More's comms staff was able to have a conversation with Stephanie Nolan about this series and the countries she's visited and the different approaches that countries are taking in response to malaria and other mosquito-borne diseases. And it covered solutions like Wolbachia and improving infrastructure, and just this awareness about, as we're seeing in the news, about mosquito-borne disease, climate and health, and more. And the next one I wanted to move on to was the GCF board. You'll see in, I can briefly change what I'm sharing. So the GCF board, which is the Green Climate Fund, just I think 2 days ago, approved their first kind of explicit health project. This is based in Laos. It's strengthening climate resilience of the Lao People's Democratic Republic health system. This program is led by Save the Children in Australia. And you'll see that the project pipeline or timeline is quite long. They had submitted a concept note back in 2021. It was approved just a few days ago, actually yesterday in 2023. And this is kind of a big feat, I'd say, for health and climate, GCF being one of the more difficult and challenging organization funders to try to get funding for health, or just in general, due to their complexity of their approval system, accreditation system, and just funding access in general for many lower middle income countries. And then next on the left, September's unprecedented temperature spike. We're seeing, I think in August and now in September, this report is based on the Copernicus Climate Change Service of the EU. That September of this year was the hottest September on record. And some frightening information from the report that the whole month was on average 1.75 degrees Celsius warmer than the estimate for the September average for 1850 to 1900, the pre-industrial period. So quite striking, that 1.75 over that 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we're seeing more and more reports that we'll be exceeding that 1.5 degrees quite soon. And Sadie, thanks so much for that additional link to an article. I also did read that and appreciate your bluntness and directness about this topic. Did you want to say a little bit more about that?
No, that's okay. I feel like for years we've been saying, hey, this is a problem, you should be looking at it, this is a problem. And now people are like, is this a problem?
Right.
So yeah, I'm trying to remain professional without losing the message.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're featured in a lot of really kind of recently as people are getting more interested in climate health, I think your name is popping up a lot more, and so I think that directness is very refreshing.
Thanks for that. I hope it's useful.
And then one last thing, just on the infrastructure piece, there is this article that was released on a conceptual climate health infrastructure pathways model. I don't think this is anything new to most of us here, that physical infrastructure can lead to greater risks in climate health, but just emphasizing that the climate health world is and needs to expand to far beyond people in health and people in climate, but also people working kind of in the infrastructure world. So this was just an interesting graphic that came out of that article. And then I'll make sure to link all of the articles from this conversation and on the slide in a follow-up email. All right, and so to kick off our warm-up question, just want to ask the group, how has climate change impacted your day-to-day? This could be professionally, this could be just kind of seasonally what you're seeing personally in your life where you're located. So I'm going to ask folks to come off of mute. If you're unable to, please feel free to answer in the chat. But I'm just going to go down alphabetically from my participant list here. So Christian, if you wouldn't mind coming off of mute, answering that question, and then we'll have Kaushik follow up.
Sure. I think the most direct thing is work we've done very recently within the group on the cholera outbreak in Malawi late last year and earlier this year, and really seeing how increasingly strong weather patterns, and particularly cyclones, really lead to much bigger health burdens, and particularly in the case of Malawi, where you then have the double whammy, where you have both increased malaria and cholera at the same time, putting enormous strains on both health systems.
Yeah, thanks for that. Kaushik?
In terms of climate change, I would say we are not suffering too much from the climate change, but maybe that would also be an understatement given that I stay in Delhi. We are suffering a lot from water problems. So access to safe water is becoming increasingly an increasing problem. And then every summer you would find out at the juncture of summer and monsoon, you will essentially find a lot of waterborne diseases, and that is right now it has started affecting, the high rises as well. So waterborne diseases are quite frequent, including diarrhea and typhoid. And apart from that, heat strokes are common, especially during summer, and dengue is taking a toll. Of course, there are, I think, challenges related to surveillance of dengue, but it will continue to rise as the winter temperatures go up, especially during this time of the year. So yeah, these are all problems that are getting stemmed from the changing weather or climate. I don't know how much it will change in the coming years, in the immediate future, but definitely it is becoming more and more difficult for everyone.
Thanks, Kaushik. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of news on flooding that we've seen in India the past year. So thanks for sharing that. Ikwa?
Hi. Sorry, my camera is not working.
That's all right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So for me, currently I'm mostly indoors because I'm trying to get my work. I'm doing my PhD. I'm trying to get my work going. So I don't get to see the outside world much. But from what I see from the news in my country, currently there's so much rainfall, and the dam has been opened. There is spillage, and people are having to get resettled from their area. And there was quite some serious issues with death and drowning because of how the whole thing happened, So yeah, the relevance of climate change keeps staring at our face each and every day. Yeah.
Thanks, Iqbal. James?
Thanks, Grace. Excuse me. Well, in addition, I guess there's the everyday impact on our work. My work in Mozambique in particular, dealing with, I guess, the changing onset and duration of the high transmission season, as well as the impacts of things like cyclones that seem to be almost an annual occurrence. But on a more, I guess, personal level here in Colorado, we are dealing with, I guess, less predictable season and seasonal transition. So we'll get significant precipitation in later in the spring or even in the early summer. So far since I've lived here, I think August might be the only month when we haven't received snow, but which is kind of fun and kind of not fun for various reasons, but more practically, we'll get significant late spring, like May, June precipitation events, and then it'll be dry for the rest of the summer until late October, which is usually considered near winter here. And then we end up with things like the fires that destroyed an entire community in Boulder in the middle of the winter. So essentially, the biggest issue, I think, with that is largely more unpredictable and overwhelmingly drier climate, and that results in increased fire danger throughout a lot more of the year. So a longer fire season than we've had in the past. Wow, I sound good. Apologies again. And then more importantly, obviously, it affects the ski season. And so we have to deal with sometimes much less predictable, sometimes shorter. Sometimes it snows outside of the ski season, but obviously that's very important. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, James. And Dr. Muo? Maybe we'll come back to Dr. Muo. How about Nate?
Hey, y'all.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
I can hear you. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Muo.
Say that again. I didn't get the question right.
Oh, the question is, how has climate change impacted your day-to-day?
How climate change
has impacted your day-to-day. So if it's professionally or it can be personally, just on a day-to-day level.
You can hear me. Sorry, I'm using my phone and I'm getting some calls. That's why I'm on and off. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I can hear you.
Okay. So I think the day-to-day climate change impact has on the health sector, we've seen it in impacting partly positively and negatively. I think now with the merge of climate and vector-borne diseases and other infectious diseases coming up, emerging, we've seen that the climate change is giving seasonal variability of how we are seeing diseases coming up. And at the same time, it's creating a challenge when it comes to nutrition, especially in Kenya now. We are facing a lot of starvation. We have a lot of communities without food because that is directly impacted by the climate change. Based on that, we see that people getting diseases, and at the same time, we are seeing diseases coming in areas that have not been defined earlier. So the climate is actually a key component for the day-to-day activities that are happening currently. And partly is in the health sector, we've taken charge. Actually, I'm from a meeting, a conference about infectious diseases and HIV. And one of the things that came out were the challenges we've seen due to climate change and change of behavior. So what I can say in a nutshell is that climate impacts directly to health and to diseases and to the well-being of people, especially around this area where we are living. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Mual. Nate?
Sure. In Albuquerque, the Rio Grande, which is our biggest river, ran dry this summer. I think that's only the second time it's happened in the last 40 years.
That is terrifying. And then Dr. Ryan.
I think the way it's impacted me in my day-to-day, obviously I'm here in Florida, and so a combination of wonky hurricane seasons, the length of warm seasons moving higher up the state, as it were, the poleward shift that we see with lots of climate things, I think is definitely occurring here. We're seeing, slightly larger outbreaks of tropical diseases that can show up and be transmitted locally. In a normal year, we get sort of more of that happening. And whether that's the intersection of increased demography, infrastructure, and climate and sort of extended resource impacts is not clear to me yet, but obviously having worked on this stuff, I'm now getting lots of questions, and so that's how it impacts me in my day-to-day. And it's sort of interesting as an academic scientist to pivot to thinking about how that academic science can inform the kinds of decisions that can be made for intervention. And it's not a career path that I was sort of set on to start with, but it clearly it became incredibly important, and sort of the importance of it has increased. And so I'm learning new things every day as a result of climate change impacts.
It's very interesting. And then we had Dr. Sergi join us a little later, but Dr. Sergi, do you want to answer this question? Not sure your audio is coming through.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. I think, I agree with Dr. Ryan assessment that there is obviously, in an increase of the diseases that you have seen probably in other months of the year. I obviously can say that substantially there is an impact in our workload of patients that usually you have the different times of the year, those are the diseases of patients. However, I need also to say one thing, that some of these aspects have been untangled with the pandemic or post-pandemic aspect, and I think not only for specific diseases, but also specific organic disease, but also mental health diseases, I think would be quite I would say interesting or exciting to explore the aspect of post-pandemic or pandemic and the current climate changes. That said, I think we should still apply some objective criteria and also try to identify new pathways, how to better distinguish some trends from others. And I think it's one of the aspects that I've seen as not only in our group, but also in many global discussions, that sometimes the education of some scientists is probably not optimal. And I think this is another aspect we should have a stronger academic input in assessing specific questions. Sorry for my long answer.
All right, thank you. I think you hit on a few important points there. Mental health, I think youth tend to be kind of the big voices for mental health and climate change at that intersection. But yeah, a lot there. All right, thanks everyone for sharing. Oh, and for me, I'm based in California, and when I grew up, we didn't have really a fire season, but now there is such thing as a fire season due to the drought across the state. So we were very familiar with N95 masks prior to COVID due to kind of the smoke and not having our windows open. So there were days, and there are days where we just can't safely be breathing air outside. So a big change in terms of what the seasons look like for me in California. All right, we'll move right on. Just a quick announcement in case you missed it, that our new name for IMACS is the Institute for Health Modeling and Climate Solutions, as a response to kind of the feedback we've received from the expert network over the past year, and just the growing amount of models, solutions that are not just malaria-based and have kind of crossover across climate-sensitive infectious diseases. So silent H there, but we wanted to keep IMACS for continuity, so health modeling and climate solutions. All right, so just going into a few announcements here, some upcoming funding opportunities. One from Grand Challenges Africa, this is due quite soon, November 7th, on catalyzing equitable AI use to improve global health. There is an Grand Challenges India opportunity on the same topic coming soon. So if you have expertise or in kind of any of the content areas, keep that on your radar. Another announcement here on a climate health related initiative. A new initiative called Climate X Health was launched. It's an initiative convened by the Wellcome Trust, Rockefeller Foundation, and the Global Climate and Health Alliance, and Amherst Health Africa. So it's quite new. I think it launched just maybe a month ago. They've been just releasing some things over kind of an email group. But their goal is to build on, complement, amplify the ongoing efforts of longstanding climate and health actors. So I think Wellcome Trust and GCHA have long been kind of in the climate health world. And Rockefeller and MRAF are kind of on the earlier stages, but I think this initiative will be interesting to follow, at least get some email updates from, as they kind of bring together different players in the health world. And then a few upcoming conference and speaking opportunities. One, the 2024 SRI conference, which will be held in Finland. The deadline for submissions for contributions is November 30th, so the end of next month. There are different types of contributions, so roundtables, workshops, networking, and various themes. The themes aren't quite as intuitive as they sound, so it would be worth looking through what they actually mean by them. So green transitions, transforming technologies in the future of work, living on the front lines of change, empowering the world. From what I could read, it seemed like the transforming technologies and living on the front lines of change were the two that may be the most relevant for this group. So something to check out. There's also a satellite event in Africa. So if you want to submit for a contribution, that it could be both for the event in Finland and a satellite event in Africa. And then another speaking opportunity, this is due also quite soon on Monday. This is for the ICT4D conference in Ghana this year. It's the Information Communication Technology for Development for data innovations that are impacting people's lives in humanitarian development and conservation programs. This conference is expected to be in March of 2024. And then some upcoming events here on the UNFCCC side. The Asia Pacific Climate Week is coming up mid-November in Johor, Malaysia. And of course, COP28 following that in Dubai from November 30th to December 12th. It's supposed to be a quite large group there, as the Expo City is a much larger venue than Sharm el-Sheikh last year. And then 2 virtual events, one virtual webinar on building resilient health systems in a changing world. This is next week, in 2 weeks on November 8th, moderated by APT and featuring panelists from PEPFAR, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and a representative from the South African Health Department. And then lastly, another virtual event, a live launch of the Lancet 2023 report. So this is the Lancet Countdown Report on Climate and Health. This will be the 15th of November. The Lancet Countdown releases their report every year, just right before COP. And this will have kind of the updates on what's been going on this past year on climate health. So it's a live launch report. If you don't catch it, they'll obviously have the report available online afterwards. All right. Any other opportunities or events, if you have that you'd like to flag, please put them in the chat. And before we dive into this discussion, I wanted to highlight just a few folks at ASTMH from the past week who we saw from the network. We have Prasad, who had a poster on the drivers of dengue and designing operationally efficient vector control policies in Sri Lanka. Richard Maud, who had several posters, but just wanted to highlight a few here: maximizing the use of human population movement data for malaria control and elimination, forecasting dengue incidents. And then Shital here had also several posters, but one on malaria modeling in LMIC, mathematical modeling for case management in Mozambique, South Africa, and Eswatini, and then just a larger climate-sensitive infectious disease model for the Global South. So if any of these kind of posters sound interesting to you, I encourage you all to reach out. If you don't have a connection to the person on the screen, I'm happy to also make that connection for you. And then I just wanted to ask James if you had any general reflections you wanted to share from ASTMH, or if anyone else was at ASTMH, if you have some key takeaways that you wanted to share, I invite you to share them.
Yep. Thanks, Grace. I think in general, I would just say that it was, I think from the perspective of the work that forecasting healthy futures and IMACS in particular, and then also in addition to that, just I guess the general work that we do in climate and health, as well as obviously the work that we had done through the Global Health subgroup. I think it was very successful. I think we achieved everything that we wanted to achieve, but my overall feeling coming out of that was certainly that there is a lot of interest in this, a lot of momentum to make this more standardized approach, or make this more standardized way of thinking about the work that we do. How does climate and climate change affect our day-to-day work, in addition to what can we do to I guess mitigate the potential impacts in the future as well. But I still think that there are some larger links and I guess momentum that is missing. And the first one is obviously the funding one, and I do think that that will change in the future. I don't know if that's in the next year or the next 5 years, but it does seem like organizations that have been thinking pretty vertically in terms of disease funding, like Gates Foundation, are starting to think more broadly about health system strengthening in the face of climate change and pandemic preparedness, and just to better measure the effects of climate change on malaria in particular. So that's good. And then I think with maybe the momentum from the Green Climate Fund, also hopefully funding more health related or specific projects, that's good. I do think there's also a lot of opportunity in the future, and it seems to be more interest than I've seen previously, at least in linking some of this work that we're doing, or I guess the implications, so to speak, of climate change on infectious diseases or climate sensitive diseases, and what this means for health system strengthening and the links to pandemic preparedness and the resulting opportunities for thinking more, I guess, horizontally to building that resiliency within health systems in general. So I think that those are opportunities and avenues of momentum moving forward. So other than that, I think it was, like I said, great. It was great to see so much representation of the fields that we think are interesting.
Thanks, James. And I know, Christian, you were also at ASTMH. Did you want to share a couple takeaways?
Sure, thank you. I think a couple of takeaways is that I think there were a lot of very interesting and useful conversations I've had, particularly with the Malaria Atlas Project, and a couple of other people thinking not only with regards to impact of climate change on where does malaria move, what does it mean for incidence of dengue and things like that, but also what does it mean in terms of outbreak risk for things like cholera, for example, and other infectious diseases. So I think that's interesting, because I think there is a question of spread of diseases, and where do we move to? How do the endemic areas potentially expand? But also, what does it mean for actual outbreak risk of other pathogens?
All right, thank you. And again, if you have if you'd like to connect with anyone who presented here, I may have missed a couple. Please let me know. Happy to connect you. All right, we'll dive into kind of an introduction to this discussion, looking at 2 different climate and infectious disease model catalogs. This first one is from a collaboration between IAI and the Wellcome Trust. Just wanted to go through some of the features of this online tool and some of the findings. And this is, I don't want to put Dr. Ryan on the spot, but I know you had also worked on this tool. Did you want to offer a few words to preface or introduce the tool? Also, no pressure if you don't want to.
I absolutely don't want to steal the floor from whoever is bringing this to the meeting today. I was very excited to see that this was being discussed. This was a consultancy for Wellcome Trust, doing a sort of big scoping of what was out there, what the software available was, and essentially describing sort of the state of what there was in anticipation that Wellcome would then have a funding call about it. And so, yeah, we have a website of it, there's a report of it, and we also put a paper in Lancet Planetary Health about it as well, sort of summarizing just the software landscaping bit. We did also do expert elicitation, which was really interesting and important, to sort of guide where the key questions are and what people were thinking at that time. And obviously this is a field that moves incredibly fast, and priorities move incredibly fast. And so I would simply say, you know, the messages that are in there are still relevant, and also things will have evolved since this report. So I think if other folks want to update lists, that would be amazing.
Thank you. And I brought this, so you're not stealing anyone's thunder here. And very happy for you to chime in here as I kind of go through an introduction and go through the tool. So just a few findings that I'm pulling from the executive summary here, that there are a very few evidence-led operationalized models, meaning that few studies actually progress from the evidence stage to find the climate health linkages to the operational stage where this tool is actually being used. And I think that's still pretty consistent with what we found with the malaria early warning system survey that we did through IMACS this year. Another finding that there's a shortage of tools for respiratory, foodborne, and waterborne diseases, and no tools for soil-borne diseases. So I'm curious if anything has come up in the past year on that. But this is an opportunity for these tools, maybe existing tools, to start to think about the applicability to other neglected disease groups. And most of these tools were developed in endemic regions. And so another finding from this report is that the tools are needed in regions where the disease transmission will increase substantially. So we've seen kind of this change in disease spread at higher elevations due to climate change, due to emergencies. So just thinking about how these tools can be better used in different climate change settings, how geographies that are impacted by climate change more acutely can be using these tools. And then an important note here is that most of the institutions represented as tool creators are from North American European institutions. And so that just shows a large bias in where the funding is going, where the funding lives, and that there needs to be a better representation, greater representation of investigators living in countries that are most impacted by climate change. So a lot of countries in Global South where these tools are being designed to be used. So a lot more, I think that's a great piece of feedback for a lot of funders as well. And I think we're starting to see that where with some of the grand challenges, opportunities, we're seeing that the majority of the funding, I think up to 80% of that funding needs to be directed towards African-based institutions because this call is specific to the African continent. So some improvement there that I think I'm seeing in terms of the specificity of calls, but we'll see how that is reflected in future calls as we're seeing this large investment and interest in climate and health. All right, so to briefly go through this tool here, on this website, this is the objectives. This is the link to the full report that I think is definitely worth reading. With some key findings here, summarized kind of in the executive summary. And then this is the full list of tools. So you'll see just the tool name, the disease, output, region of implementation, the software, and then some additional details. So I found this really interesting to, at a glance, to review kind of all of the different softwares and the regions, but also the ability to kind of link to that specific tool and see, potentially be able to use it for the purpose of developing a new tool. And these disease areas, I think, were also really interesting, most of them being in malaria and mosquito-borne diseases, showing kind of a large bias towards malaria that we're seeing with a lot of the health modeling tools. And I think that was reflected in some of the conferences and abstracts that I've been seeing, that a lot of these health modeling tools are really in malaria. And I think that's an opportunity for us to branch out and apply that technology and that evidence and knowledge into new disease areas. So just a quick overview there. Dr. Ryan, did you want to highlight anything specifically from this tool list?
I just wanted to say that I was so excited when so we were working together with Hetco, who are a design team in London, and they designed this website for us and for the project. And I found this full list of tools, and the sort of the information we were able to put in this particular table was so useful. And I just wanted to sort of asterisk maybe that we had very strict criteria for what we were considering a tool. And that's, you know, that's sort of highlighted in the report, but basically we had this idea that there was this ideal tool that would incorporate climate inputs and epidemiological information to produce a prediction or indicator in all one package, that it would be described really transparently and then validated, and would be named for future searching and versioning, and that it was fully accessible, you know, that the code was published or available on a repository, a web platform, or some other user interface. And so that turns out to be fairly restrictive. And so there are no doubt things where, you know, anyone in this room is probably like, well, I did a thing and it's not in there. And bizarrely, the giving it a name was one of the most key things to being able to find it and make it a replicable piece of software. And so since then, you may have seen a wacky proliferation of named platforms and models. And I think we may have spurred some of that with this work. So it's useful, but it's one of those things that's not what we expected, right? We thought it was probably like software glitches were going to be the biggest issue, but it was actually sort of something that's named and findable because it's named. So yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah, interesting. Yeah, good to know. At this point, let me turn it over to Kaushik, and I think Kaushik, in your development of kind of this tool list, it may have been a little bit more like the criteria may have been different in what you may have included. So Kaushik, I'll pass it over to you to kind of screen share and share your kind of rationale with your list.
Thank you, Grace. Sorry. Is it feasible?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you everyone for staying with us, and Dr. Ryan, James, Dr. Sergey, who have been with us for quite some time now. James, thanks for the collaboration around ASTMH. And also this particular piece of work that we're presenting for the tool part. I remember Tatiana, and then James, I think Richard, Bill Pan. Am I missing someone's name? Grace. So these are some of the members who actively supported in the tool development part. But then we conducted a robust review and also integrated that to an interview. So basically, what we are trying to achieve is understand what are the digital health tools that exist in the entire ecosystem, and are there any publications, repositories, data, or available right in front of everyone, and then try to catalog those tools in three categories. You know, one is the decision support tools, the other one is more in terms of disaster and outbreak management, and the third one is more or less frontline workers tool that might not be essentially used or have been used for any kind of climate related scenarios, but have the potential for use in those scenarios. And what we did is we conducted a scoping exercise, and post that alongside that we had interview of select only experts. I think 30 or something is the number of the experts who completed an online survey form which contained nearly 100 questions to better understand kind of their experiences, the funding situations, the implementation scenarios, and barriers and enablers all across. And that was more directed towards those who have actually built some sort of early warning system, but then the entire review was much broader. As I said, it is kind of an entire catalog of digital health tools. What we have done so far is whatever tool we could extract, we have put it into a table. So this is an exhaustive table which contains all of the tools that we could have extracted. And this is an expanding table, which I believe will continue to expand in the months to come. And what happens is, for example, if you hover around or click around each of these, you will get to see a brief description of these tools, what are the languages on which these tools are built, the data input, where from they have taken, the model outputs, very similar to the welcome one. But we also included whether there are AI capabilities, field validations were done, which countries there it was applied, and was there any regional publications. And then we tried to hyperlink a few pieces. For example, first of all, which we felt really important is hyperlinking the repositories of the codes. So we kind of did an exercise of GitHub search as well. And if you just click on these links, it will open up these GitHub repositories of that corresponding project. And it required a lot of, I would say, refining of this, because the project, you will find EDIS project in some name, but if you go into actual EDIS, this is vector-borne diseases. So these repositories are named very differently. So we kind of conducted an exploratory framework for GitHub search, and then linked all of these wherever these repositories are available. For those which are new or no repositories are available, you can't actually go. You can also email directly the author if the emails have been found. So for example, if you click it, the emails appear and hello, I have a question. So this will automatically get typed in your default email channel. And And then any publication or presentation. So for example, if you click the publication, the most prominent publication will essentially show up corresponding to that tool. And so I don't know what is happening with this particular stuff. Yeah. And presentation also, if you click, if there is a particular presentation. So for example, for the EDIS project, this is the kind of presentation in, a kind of structure of presentation. It's not a real presentation, but we found that there are certain materials which are beyond, scientific publications, but they are worth looking at and they're very valuable, but we often miss those materials. So kind of creating those repository all around. There are a number of those for which Wellcome probably has funded 10 or 15 of the digital tools very recently. For some of them, we just have the email IDs. We don't have any GitHub repositories or publications because they have not been done so far. But we just put those names because as and when those things are updated, we will be able to update this particular table. And any new stuff that comes up, we will be able to update again. The next part is basically the report of the online survey that we did. And this is the kind of methodology that exists for this particular tool. And the report is a summary of the report you'll find here. These are the attributes, the challenges, and the best practices that we found through the research. And then what are some of the recommendations at very high level. And then we compiled that report into a format of something so that you will essentially scroll through as a carousel in your web browser. So you get to see whatever findings we had from all of these sources. And finally, if someone wants to also enrich the survey, so that person can essentially visit the survey page. So we have hyperlinked this survey page. So if you still want to continue or contribute to this, you can just get into this, and there will be a informed consent, and post that you can put your name and other stuff. And as you can see, we don't name any of the respondents, and whatever their responses are, we kind of aggregate the results in a way so that this kind of provides a broader understanding. We don't want a nuanced understanding that might affect, and that is really important to obtain some of the candid responses also, because we found some of the responses related to conflict situation which has stopped actually malaria early warning systems in some parts of Asia were actually highlighted in the responses. And they could be highlighted only because we actually promised that those names and who is sharing all of those information. And even when sharing, we are not specifying that in which country that conflict happened and essentially that early warning system failed. But it is good to know that these challenges exist and kind of understand that what are the kind of broader areas that we need to overcome. And these are kind of, some of the findings that we have highlighted in the reports of what percentage of digital data collection exists, risk communication exists, what is the kind of map of early warning system. So the report won't get updated in real time, but we are trying to ensure that the table updates in real time. So there will be a form that we'll share very soon. And we are also planning to put it, create an outreach of this entire tool now that the research has got completed. The motto is not to get some kind of, peer-reviewed publication. Our motto is that it reaches as many people as possible, which is not often possible when you just do a scientific publication. So we are still exploring and kind of have been a little slow on that process, but happy to hear your thoughts of how to, make it public, how to publicize this, how to enrich this, and, make this kind of a interactive process so that people continues to contribute to this catalog. And this becomes a go-to tool for everyone. And we essentially don't name just IMACS, we mention it as a IMACS expert network project, so that everyone on board in the network has contributed to this particular web tool, and that becomes our contribution to the area of science of early warning system. So that's why you are still seeing it still in my GitHub repository. We haven't made it public yet, so we'll make it public after we have a lot of consultation with the folks from the expert network, and after having that understanding, we'll make it public and publicly available for the broader audience. So over, and it would be great to understand your thoughts and your insights, and how we can improve this particular stuff. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kaushik. And apologies for not reserving enough time to discuss this. I think there's a lot we can discuss here, but for the questions that Kaushik posed and then some additional discussion questions I put in the chat, I'm happy for anyone to chime in here in the final minutes we have in the meeting. I see Christian, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. This looks great. I think this is super, super useful. What's the best way of giving feedback and looking at that? Because I think I'll need a little bit of time to just go through it in more detail. Is it easiest to send you an email, raise a GitHub issue? What's your preferred way of receiving feedback? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can share this GitHub repo link to all of you, in fact, to the broader network as well. And the only challenge that you will be finding is if you are opening this in your mobile browser, so it will not function properly, simply because we haven't tuned it for the screen ratios. It will still work very well in your desktop or laptop because it's 16:9 kind of resolution. We have kind of structured it. And once you review that, please share your detailed thoughts. And we are planning to do it a revision of this probably in the month of in late December or early January, right after COP, and actually publish the wider version of this tool, and also understand from you before that what would be the best way to publicize it. So we will create maybe 4 or 5 questions for you. One is how we can improve this tool. What are the challenges that you still see in this particular tool? The third would be that what more we can include, and we will see if in our data if those informations are still available. And then what would be the best way to scientifically communicate it, and what would be the best way to publicly communicate it for a broader audience. So these are 4 or 5 questions which we'll share with you before making it public.
I just wanted to say I think this is absolutely beautiful. And I truly appreciate that you've captured pieces that we weren't able to capture. And I think that, yeah, I think people will be very, very, very excited to see this. From a sort of how to get it out there question, we also struggled with that. So obviously welcome branded reports are a great thing. The website was our sort of secondary way of getting that out there. And then we did a bunch of presentations, sort of walking transcript led slideshows to various organizations. And then finally sort of followed up with a Lancet Planetary Health piece as well to sort of get everyone leading back to the original materials. I don't know which of those is the best strategy from what we did. And I think that in another project we did we've got a living compendium. So it's you can add things to this. That's very specific. It's about vectors and vector data sitting on the internet, and how people have different collections. And so we simply put that out there to the world and wrote a paper on a static snapshot of it. Those are the tools I can sort of, suggest, and it's at the hour. So I'm happy to keep chatting about that aspect of it, because it really is a big question, sort of how do you get it into everyone's hands?
Thanks for those insights, and it will be really helpful, to have your guidance on this. And again, I'd reiterate on the point that it won't be kind of a IMACS authored content. We'll make it expert network authored content. And before that, we will definitely share the stuff with all of those. I mean, we can't say that, it is vetted by any particular member if that member is not agreeing. So whoever actually vets this on email formally, so the name of that person will essentially get included and will write on behalf of the expert network. These are the people who are actually posting this particular stuff.
Brilliant.
All right, thanks, Dr. Ryan, Kaushik, and thanks everyone for joining today. Again, regret that we did not have enough time to discuss this further, but hopefully we can continue discussion in a next call, over email, in a separate call. Thanks everyone. I'll follow up with the recording and the materials post meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ikwa.